just come to get you. Go ahead and walk in. Oh, cool. I found it on the floor. I think it's your Hey Valley New School, it's a great time to log what you've been doing and grab your journal and something to write with and come into the center to prepare for Izzy's presentation.
Vincent's is also in the morning. 19. Yeah. So not next year, the following week.
Not Santa. Yeah.
And get out my gosh darn seat.
I was sitting here before you.
Whoa. What? You don't want to know.
She said she
I really love what I can see with audience members in their journals. And taking notes about what you hear. I love seeing that. I'll just get it.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I can't make it, but I just want to do it. My mom wants you from 10 to 1. And I can't drive yet.
Mark F. saved his spot.
I'll be right back.
I'm sorry you can't make it.
Thanks for filling in the center too, guys. Thank you.
The front row is a great place to sit. Look at Maple and Amelia. They're leading the way. Plenty of room. Plenty of room in the front row. Plenty of room next to Ashley in the second row. Come on in. Come on. Come on over back. Plenty of room in the front row. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the center for our next senior project presentation. Today, we actually have two. This morning, we get to hear from Izzy, who has been here since sophomore year. This is her third year. You may not have seen her much this year because she's been in so many theatrical performances and had an internship at the Welcome Center and was doing service and puppets and all the things all around town this year. Izzy is an excellent communicator, both written and verbally and theatrically, which you will see this morning. So she's going to share her research and the connections between two of her passions, theater and psychology. Izzy LaChapelle.
Hi everyone. Sorry if I'm a little loud. I feel like I am. Okay. My name is Izzy LaChapelle, and today I'm going to be presenting my senior capstone project, which focuses on the intersection of psychology and theater. Before I really get into it, I just want to say that this project is something that feels very personal to me. It's not just something that I picked randomly. It's something that reflects a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past few years, and also a lot about what I care about moving forward. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to walk you through how some of this project developed, the research I did, the real experiences I had directing a production, and what I ultimately learned from combining these two fields. I just want to give you a bit of a roadmap before I get into everything. I'm going to start by talking about my background and how this project developed over time, because this wasn't something that came together instantly. It was definitely a process. Then I'll move into the research that I did and the experiences that I had, especially working backstage and directing my own production. And finally, toward the end, I'll reflect on what I learned, both academically and personally, and how this project connects to what I want to do in the future. I think it's also important to note that this project wasn't just about answering a question in a traditional sense. It was really about testing that question in a real environment, with real people, and seeing what actually worked and what didn't. So a lot of what I'll be talking about comes from experience, not just secondary research. So to start, I just want to give a bit of a background. Not just what I did for this project, but how I got here. I started Valley New School my sophomore year, and one of the things I really appreciated about coming here was the ability to design my own projects around the things I actually care about. Pretty quickly, I realized that I kept coming back to psychology. I've always been interested in people, how they think, how they interact, and especially how emotions influence behavior. And I don't think that interest came from just one place. It's something that's built over time. through school, through experiences, and through observing people in everyday life. I think something that really draws me to psychology is that it feels very real and very applicable to everyday life. It's not just something that exists in textbooks or classrooms, it's something that you can observe constantly, whether that's in conversations, relationships, or even just how people react to different situations. And I've always found that really interesting because it feels like you're constantly learning, even outside of school. I also think I'm drawn to the fact that psychology doesn't always have one clear answer. A lot of it is interpretation and understanding different perspectives, which is something I've always enjoyed. At the same time, theater has been a huge part of my life, and I've been involved in Appleton West Theater since my freshman year, and I've done as many productions as I possibly could. When I say that, I really mean it. I've done main stage shows, smaller shows, community theater, and anything extra I could fit into my schedules. So for me, theater isn't just an extracurricular. It's a space where I've grown, where I've built relationships, and where I've learned how to work with people in a really intense and collaborative way. And with theater, I think what has kept me so consistently involved is that it gives you the opportunity to step into someone else's perspective in a really direct way. You're not just observing behavior, you're actually embodying it. And I've always been especially drawn to characters that are more complex or harder to fully understand, because those are the ones that feel the most real. And looking back, I think that interest in complexity is what connects my love of theater to my interest in psychology. What's interesting is that for a long time, I didn't really think about these two interests, psychology and theater, as being connected. They felt like two separate parts of my life. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they actually overlap constantly. In theater, you're constantly thinking about, why does this character act this way? What are they feeling underneath what they're saying? How do relationships between people influence behavior? And those are literally psychological questions. And a really important part of my research phase was actually defining what I meant by psychology in this context. Because I realized I wasn't just talking about general psychology. I was specifically engaging with something called applied psychology. Applied psychology is essentially the use of psychological principles in real-world situations. Instead of just studying behavior in theory, it focuses on how we actually apply that understanding to things like communication, relationships, and group dynamics. And in that sense, theater becomes a perfect example of applied psychology because everything that happens in a rehearsal or performance is based on understanding and responding to human behavior in real time. A really helpful source for me during this phase explained that understanding behavior requires looking at multiple factors at once. Things like past experiences, environmental influences, and interpersonal relationships. And I realized that actors and directors are constantly doing that, even if they don't label it that way. For example, when we talk about a character's past experiences, we're essentially asking, what has shaped this person into who they are? And that directly affects how they respond in the present moment. When we look at relationships between characters, we're analyzing dynamics like power, trust, and conflict, things that are heavily studied in psychology, especially areas like social psychology. When we're analyzing behavior, we're not just looking at what a character says. We're asking why they may say it, and what they're avoiding, and what they might be feeling underneath the surface. So, during this research phase, I started to realize that theater isn't just storytelling. It's actually a structured way of studying and representing human behavior, which is why the connection to psychology is so strong. So this project really came from that realization, that theater is not just a performance, it's a way of studying and understanding this human behavior. Even something that seems really simple, like deciding on how a character would react in a scene, actually requires a lot of psychological thinking. And I think that's what's most interesting is when you're in a rehearsal, you're not always consciously thinking, this is psychology. But that's exactly what you're doing. You're analyzing behavior and trying to understand people. At the beginning of this project, I originally planned to write my own play. I thought that that would be a creative way to explore psychological ideas, especially since I already had experience with acting and analyzing scripts. But after talking with Miss K, she encouraged me to take a different direction, one that focused more on analysis and application. She suggested that I find an existing play that already explores psychological themes and direct it instead. And looking back, I think that was a really important shift, because instead of just creating something, I had to really engage with the material, interpret it, and bring it to life in a way that required both creativity and understanding. As part of my research process, I actually went to my theater director at West, Mrs. Whittle, and spent time in her classroom looking through a wide range of plays that she had on her bookshelf. And this was a really important step, because it wasn't just about finding any play. It was about finding the right play for both my research goals and my practical limitations. As I was reading through different options, I started to notice that a lot of them didn't quite fit what I needed. Some had very large casts, which wouldn't have been realistic to manage. Others required complex sets or technical elements that I simply didn't have the resources or experience to execute, especially since this was my first time directing. And some were just too long, which would have made my rehearsal process even more difficult, given how busy my schedule already was. So I had to be intentional about what I was looking for. I needed something with a relatively small but still dynamic cast, a simple and flexible set, and a shorter runtime so that it would actually be manageable within the time frame that I had. At the time, I didn't want to sacrifice depth. I was specifically looking for a play that had strong psychological themes, something that would allow me to explore behavior, relationships, and emotional dynamics in a meaningful way. That's ultimately why I chose Do You Feel Anger? And it stood out because it had a really strong underlying message, but it didn't feel overly preachy. It balanced serious themes with humor in a way that made it engaging, while still thought-provoking. And as I moved into directing, I also had to start thinking differently, not just about the script itself, but about how I would communicate my ideas to my actors. I had to adapt my communication style, listen to different perspectives, and figure out how to guide the process without controlling every detail. And that's something I'll come back to later, because it became a really important part of what I learned through this project. I also think this shift from writing to directing challenged me in a different way. Writing is more individual. You have control over everything. But directing requires you to take your ideas and communicate them to other people, and then collaborate with them to bring those ideas to life. And that meant I had to let go of some control, which is definitely difficult at times. But it also ended up being one of the most valuable parts of the project, because I learned how to adapt my communication style, listen to other perspectives, and work through ideas as a group instead of just on my own. When I found Do You Feel Anger, I remember reading it and immediately thinking, this is exactly what I've been looking for. It felt psychological. Every character felt like they represented something deeper, not just a personality, but a way of thinking or coping. The play begins when Sophia, a professional empathy coach, is hired by a lawsuit-threatened agency to conduct a series of workshops. She quickly discovers that her task is nearly impossible. The employees struggle to identify basic human emotions and view empathy as a literal bird. As the workshop progresses, the office atmosphere becomes increasingly unsettling. One female employee, Eva, recounts being frequently mugged in the kitchen, while the male staff engage in crude, aggressive behavior. The story highlights the absurdity of a world where male feelings are prioritized over female safety. Ultimately, the pressure of the toxic environment begins to erode Sophia's own professional composure and sense of self. One thing I didn't initially expect to learn through this process was how much goes into actually producing a play from a logistical standpoint. I had to go through the process of ordering the scripts and securing the rights to perform it, which involved working with a licensing company and making sure everything was approved properly. That was a completely new experience for me, and it gave me a better understanding of how theater operates, not just creatively, but professionally. In terms of the play itself, while I thought it was extremely strong overall, there were a few adjustments I chose to make as a director. Some of the language in the script felt like it was included more for shock value than for contributing to the message. So I made small cuts and changes to make the performance more appropriate for our audience. But at the same time, I was very intentional about preserving the integrity of the script. I didn't want to change anything that would take away from the author's original message or the psychological depth of the play. And I think one of the best examples of how the play works is how it uses humor to draw the audience in. There are moments that feel very exaggerated or absurd, and people laugh. But then, right after, there's often a shift where you realize what's actually being said underneath that humor. And that contrast is what makes the play so effective, because it keeps the audience engaged, while also encouraging them to think more deeply about what they're watching. I remember reading this play and noticing that I was reacting to it in two different ways at the same time. On one hand, I was laughing because a lot of it is genuinely funny and exaggerated. But on the other hand, I also felt kind of uncomfortable because the situations felt very real in a different way. And I think that contrast is what makes the play so effective. It draws you in with humor, but then makes you think more deeply. I also noticed that even though the situations were exaggerated, the dialogue felt very realistic, which made the characters feel believable. And that balance between realism and exaggeration is really what highlights the psychological aspects of the play. One of the reasons this play stood out so much to me is because of its themes. It deals with emotional repression, specifically the idea that people don't always know how to express what they're feeling. It also looks at workplace culture, gender dynamics, and power structures. And something that I found especially interesting is how it explores the idea of what emotions are considered acceptable, especially for men. To really understand how these themes play out, it's helpful to look at specific moments in the play. For example, early on, when Sophia is trying to introduce empathy exercises, many of the employees respond with confusion or discomfort. Instead of engaging seriously, they often deflect with humor or avoid the conversation altogether. That's a clear example of emotional avoidance, which is something studied in psychology as a defense mechanism. There are also strong examples of workplace power structures. Certain characters dominate conversations or dismiss perspectives, which reflects the hierarchical dynamics that are common in real-world workplaces. In terms of gender dynamics, Sophia and Eva's experiences highlight what it feels like to be in a male-dominated environment. There are moments where their perspectives are overlooked or minimized, which reflects broader societal patterns. And when we look specifically at the male characters, many of them struggle to express vulnerability. Instead of directly communicating their emotions, they often default to humor, deflection, or even aggression. For example, when faced with uncomfortable topics, a character might make a joke instead of engaging seriously, or shift the conversation entirely. And what's interesting is that these behaviors aren't presented as intentional. They come from a lack of emotional awareness, which ties back to the idea that people aren't always taught how to process or express their feelings. So through these scenes, the play doesn't just show behavior, it reveals the underlying psychological patterns behind it. In the play, a lot of the male characters struggle to express vulnerability. And while the play exaggerates this, it reflects something that exists in real life. That's where the psychology comes in. It's not just about what the characters do, but why they do it. One of the most interesting things about the play is how it explores emotional repression. The characters don't necessarily think they're doing anything wrong. They just don't have the tools or the awareness to communicate their emotions effectively. And that's something we see in real life all the time. People don't always express what they're really feeling because they don't know how, or because they don't feel like it's acceptable. The play also connects to larger societal ideas. So even though the play exaggerates these ideas, it actually makes them more visible. It allows the audience to recognize patterns of behavior that might otherwise go unnoticed. Before I even started directing, I knew I needed to expand my perspective. So I worked backstage in Honk Jr. and Avenue Q. And this was honestly one of the most eye-opening parts of my project. Because when you're backstage, you see everything. You see how much coordination it takes. You see how people communicate under pressure. I remember moments where something would go wrong, like a missed cue or a prop issue, and everyone just had to adjust immediately. And what stood out to me was how much that depended on trust and communication. One thing I experienced firsthand while directing was how important communication becomes under pressure. There were moments during rehearsals, and especially close to the performance, where things didn't go as planned. Whether it was confusion about blocking, missing elements, or time constraints, we had to adjust quickly. I remember a specific moment where something wasn't working the way I had originally planned. And instead of trying to force it, I had to quickly rethink the approach and communicate that clearly with my actors. And what made that possible was the level of trust we had built. My actors were willing to adapt because they trusted the process, and I had to trust them to take direction and run with it. That experience really showed me how much directing relies on clearer communication, flexibility, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. It's not just about having a plan. It's about being able to adjust that plan in real time. That's when I started realizing how much psychology plays a role, not just in acting, but every part of theater. When I started directing my own production, I knew I wanted my process to reflect everything I had been learning. I didn't want it to feel like I was just telling actors what to do. I wanted it to feel collaborative and intentional. So one of the first things I did was have my actors fill out detailed character questionnaires. I didn't make these simple. I asked questions that really forced them to think, like, what does your character fear the most? What do they want from other people? What do they avoid talking about? How do they react when they feel uncomfortable? And what I noticed was the actors who really engaged with those questions gave much stronger performances, because they weren't just memorizing lines, they were understanding behavior. When I started directing, I really wanted to focus on helping actors understand their characters on a deeper level. And something I noticed was that directors approached this process differently. Some went really in depth right away, while others needed more guidance. That showed me that people think and process information in different ways, which is also a psychological concept. And it forced me to adapt my approach as a director to better support each individual. Before I even started working with my actors, I spent a lot of time trying to plan everything out in advance. I was thinking about blocking, costuming, lighting, set design. I had a lot of ideas, and I wanted to be as prepared as possible going into rehearsals. I also worked with Adrian on costuming. We had conversations about how different clothing choices could reflect character personalities and relationships. But one thing I quickly realized is that it's very difficult to be completely self-sufficient in a process like this. There are so many moving parts, and not everything can be planned ahead of time. In fact, some things didn't come together until the day of the performance, and that was definitely stressful. But it also taught me how to adapt and focus on what was most important in the moment. So even though I started with a very detailed plan, I had to learn how to adjust that plan as the process went on. And while I was working through all of that, my actors were also starting to engage with their characters. One of the biggest challenges was definitely the rehearsal process. Because most of my actors were also involved in Bye Bye Birdie, our schedules overlapped almost completely. So we had to rely heavily on virtual rehearsals. I remember feeling really unsure about that at first, because everything I had learned suggested that in-person rehearsals were way more effective. But I didn't really have another option. So instead of focusing on what wasn't working, I focused on what could work. We used that time for discussion, analyzing characters, and for really understanding the scripts. One of our biggest challenges we faced was that we spent a large portion of our rehearsal process meeting over Zoom. Because of that, my actors didn't really have time or structure to fully memorize their lines. But something interesting that came out of the performance was that several audience members told me that actors holding scripts didn't actually take away from their understanding of the show. And I think that's because we had spent so much time focusing on character understanding rather than just memorization. During our Zoom rehearsals, we would go over blocking that I had planned, but we also spent a lot of time discussing character motivations, line delivery, and the meaning behind different parts of the script. We would take specific lines and break them down. What does this character actually mean here? What are they feeling underneath what they're saying? And this connects directly to psychological research, especially in terms of analyzing behavior. Instead of just performing actions, we were trying to understand the internal reasoning behind those actions. The character questionnaires also played a big role in this. When we discussed them as a group, it created opportunities for deeper conversation about how each character thinks and reacts. So, even though the format wasn't ideal, it actually reinforced the psychological aspect of the process in a really strong way. And then, when we finally got into the same room, everything came together much faster than I expected. Things like timing, eye contact, and physical cues became really important, especially in high-pressure situations like the scenes in the show. Looking back on this project, I think one of the biggest things I've realized is that theater and psychology are not separate. They're deeply connected. Theater is a space where people explore emotions, relationships, and behavior in a very real way. And psychology provides the tools to understand that. This project challenged me in ways I didn't expect. It forced me to adapt, to lead, and to think critically about how people interact. And I think that's something I'll carry with me, no matter what I end up doing in the future. Next year, I'll be attending the University of Wisconsin-Madison to study psychology. Right now, I'm especially interested in becoming a child psychologist or therapist, but I'm still exploring different possibilities. I'm especially interested in working with children in the future because I think early emotional development is really important. And I think my experience in theater has already helped me to develop skills that would be useful in that kind of work, like empathy, communication, and understanding different perspectives. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this project is that theater and psychology are not separate. They're deeply connected in ways that I didn't fully realize before. Theater is a space where people explore emotions, relationships, and behavior in a very real way, and psychology provides the tools to understand those things. This project also helped me grow personally. It taught me how to lead, how to adapt, and how to communicate more effectively with others. And those are skills that go beyond theater. They're things that I'll use in whatever I do in the future. And I'm really excited to continue exploring that moving forward. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Silhouette.
This is kind of a weird question. I wasn't sure how to word it. But before you realized the connection between theater and psychology, were there any skills and patterns that you just learned from theater that you applied to real life that now looking back you realize is like something to do with psychology? Does that make sense?
So skills that I learned from theater that I was applying in real life, and then I realized that was psychology?
Yes.
Okay,
Just
that's
like-
a hard question. I guess a lot of it is like delegation. Like you don't think about how you like communicate with people the things that you need, because if you've ever done theater, you know that you're not supposed to give other actors notes, and that's a really hard thing, especially like it was hard for me to shift my mindset when I became a director to be like, now I can tell you what to do. So I don't know. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer.
Made sense to me.
Okay. Veronica?
How do you get into character, memorize your lines, or, understand the background or feelings of the character yourself?
So how am I getting into the character and, okay, processing characters. I think the character questionnaire, a lot of actors or like directors, you might think that that is like overkill, but I definitely was doing that. I do that in my own like shows when I'm playing a character because I think that that's really important. Some of it seems like a little much, like you don't need to know your character's religion. That's not always important, or like some of them are a little funny, but I think that that is something that I would do when I was in shows, and I really encouraged my actors to do the same because it helps you think about not just what's happening in that scene, but like, where does your character go after this scene is over? Do you think that they went home, or like, what does their house look like? What is their family like? Because even if you're playing a very small part, that helps you like get in the zone of your character. Aiden?
Of the parts you have played, which have been the hardest and which have been the easiest to get into the mindset of?
Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to rephrase your question. Out of the characters I've played, I think that the hardest for me to get into was, a lot of people don't know this show, but Avenue Q, I played Kate Monster, and that was a very hard role. I did offstage, on my off nights, I was backstage crew, so I got a good mix of onstage and offstage for that show. And I think that Kate was a really hard role to play because she was so different from myself. Like, there was some parts that I definitely felt like were similar to me, but then I really had to make sure that I was tapping into, like, she's more aggressive than I would say that I am, just in, like, the way that she, like, responds to things. I'm more of, like, when I'm angry, I cry, and when she's angry, she blows up. So that was really hard for me to get into, and that was another thing where like a character questionnaire, you're like, okay, how is she feeling in this moment, and how can I like connect that to something that's maybe happened to me personally, because that's a lot of acting, is you're trying to find your own experiences that you feel like you can relate to. And I think the easiest character for me to play, like connect to, honestly, any of my ensemble roles, just because you can really create that character out of whatever you want. Like I said to Veronica, you can design this character however you want, so they can be as similar to you as you want or far away from you as you want, because you don't have any lines, so you can really make up whatever backstory and motivations you want for yourself. Yeah, Maple.
You plan on continuing to be involved in theater after high school?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep doing theater after high school. I think Madison has a great theater program where you don't have to be getting your bachelor in fine arts. Like you can keep doing theater whether you're going for arts or not. So I think that's a great opportunity for me. Yeah.
When will we see the play that you've been making, or is it still in production?
So my play actually it was in April. I probably should have maybe clarified that in my speech, but yeah, it was last month. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah.
Who was your favorite actor and
I do not have any favorite actors. They all did amazing. I'm so proud of them.
what was your favorite character that you played?
My favorite character that I think I've ever played was Portia in Something Rotten, because I feel like she was like different from me, but she was also like a part of me. Like I feel like she's like a very exaggerated version of me in real life. Yeah.
Now that you have done backstage, onstage, and directing, which of the three would you prefer, or if you had to rank the order, which you prefer of the three?
Ranking the three, okay. That's a hard one. I definitely would say acting first, like on stage first, is my favorite of the three. Then I would say directing, just because that was such a different. It was very stressful. I don't know how Maple does it, but it was really rewarding, and I was really proud. And then backstage crew is third, not because I didn't enjoy it, just because I really wanted to be on stage, I think. Yeah, Veronica.
What was your research process like?
Yeah, my research process, it was I reached out to a lot of directors that I've worked with in the past, and it was kind of like, I think I met with at least 4 of them over coffee, some of them over Zoom and stuff, and I was like, this is my plan, this is my play, or like some of them was before I even knew what play I wanted to do, but I was like, this is my plan, help me, like, do you have any tips for me? And so I learned a lot from just like talking to directors that I had worked with, and you know, a lot of them I'm good friends with, so it wasn't that scary. And then I did a lot of Miss K helped me. She got a couple books for me. I did a lot of online research, and then I tried to kind of do the same note cards that I did for any other project, but I did I think 475. So I tried to do a lot more and be a lot more thorough and have more essential questions and subtopics and stuff. Yeah. Advice for future seniors. Don't go to Renaissance and have an internship and do a senior project at the same time. It's really hard. I hope that was good advice. Yeah.
Izzy, can you explain a little bit more of that? Like, how did you make that choice to go to Renaissance AM Valley New School, and how did you juggle it, and what were the pros and cons?
I don't know. I was, for a long time, I think since my sophomore year, I've been helping out at the AASD Welcome Center. And then I was going in over the summer, and I was like getting my hours in for service, and they're like, do you want to get paid to do this? And I was like, okay. And they're like, great, you're going to have to come in 10 hours a week. So I already was just coming in for mornings here at VNS because I go to Renaissance in the afternoons, which is, if you don't know, art school, right? Okay. And then, so now I go in to my internship twice a week for 4 hours, on 4 hours Monday, 4 hours Wednesday, and then they'll also send me stuff. They'll just email me stuff if they want me to do like online work. And then I will go to Renaissance in the afternoon, which is a lot because it's 10 different classes over the course of the week. You have 2 classes every single day in the afternoon, and they alternate every single day, except for like AP Lit, which I have to do twice a week. So it's a lot. I hope that was, I don't know if that was answering your question of what my schedule is, but that's what it looks like. Yeah.
Is there any other plays you considered, or like what was cool about them?
I don't know. There was a lot of, I read a lot and they all kind of blurred together after a while. I think this play specifically like fit all of my needs, and there were so many cool plays. Like if you've ever talked to Mrs. Whittle, she's always talking about this play where it's like space princesses and they're like, I think it's supposed to be like Star Trek, but I thought that was cool. There were so many where I started reading them and then I was like, this is like way too many people, or this is way too ambitious. So I don't have any like specific ones that I was really considering. I think that as soon as I found this one, which Do You Feel Anger, I found online, that one I was immediately like, this is so much better. This is fitting everything that I needed it to fit. Yeah, Annabelle.
What was your favorite production so far?
That's so hard. I think I've loved every production I've been in for different reasons. I think that I just did Bye Bye Birdie, and I think that that will always have a special place in my heart because that was my very last one at West. And it was such a good group of people. I don't know. It was awesome. I loved getting to do it with everyone. And I loved my character, and I loved the show.
What's a performance you want to do?
Like a show that I want to do? Okay. This is controversial, but I've always wanted to be in Seussical the musical. Because I love Dr. Seuss. Yeah. Ooh. My favorite VNS memory, honestly, I would spend a lot of time last year with Tegan and Adrian doing math in like the gaming. I think it was the room with the giant Lego league table. And that was fun. I liked getting to do math in there and hanging out and talking. So I know that's probably a lame memory, but I don't spend a lot of time here. Yeah.
I think that's an updated question, but what's your dream character?
Gertrude McFuzz and Seussical. I don't know. I have a lot of. I really wanted to be Anna in Frozen, and I was really sad when I found out North was doing Frozen. But that's okay. Richard.
Dad. As you progress through your high school journey, what are some lessons that you've learned, and how have the people in your life helped you to learn those lessons?
I don't even know where to start with that. Wait, as I've gone through high school, the journey.
Your entire high school journey. What are some lessons that you've learned? I mean, you've grown as a person. Mm-hmm. You figured some things out in life, right? And you haven't learned all these lessons by yourself. You've had people help you. What are some of those lessons, and how have people helped you learn those lessons?
This is the most vague question ever.
This is your presentation.
My dad has taught me a lot of lessons, like don't leave my window open when it's raining, because my carpet will get soggy. 4? You said I have to say 4?
I did not say
Oh.
Just looking for some lessons.
I don't know. That's a hard one. I think that it's important to like find your group of people, I guess. Like I was kind of saying, I feel like West Theater is really my group of people. So I think that that was important for like high school in general. It's important to figure out a space where you can like feel like you belong and feel like a part of things, because I don't know, high school is hard. That's a good moral that I learned. I don't know, I'll have to come back to you on that. I don't know, my life lessons. I still have a lot of life to live.
You could sing that.
Thank you, Izzy.